So this will be part 2 of pattern layout and cutting. So I've laid out a couple of pieces of my pattern, and I mentioned I was making a hoodie. So let's spotlight. Okay, I painstakingly had to lay out this. It's like a zigzag print on this pattern of this fabric, but it's a knit pattern and it's really kind of sheer. I mean, you can see right through it. So I had a lot of trouble lining up the zigzag from the underside because I don't want them to be, wonky. I wanted to be them straight across my back. So I had to very carefully align all of my zigzag. So that is something that you would, have, if it comes up, remember those things. Remember, if you're cutting a plaid or checkered, that you want to line up your sides and your seams so that they meet each other and look nice when you sew them, like wallpaper, like you're putting wallpaper on. So, and this is for you, Diane. I've got my pieces laid out. This is the front, this is the back. The back is on the fold. And because of the patterns are transparent, you can flip them over. So you can really see really well on this piece here. But because I laid mine out a different way, I had to flip them over. But what we have on these pattern pieces is what we call the straight of grain. This is the grain line. That's the long straight line when you buy fabric. That's called the selvage. And there's the arrow on the pattern. This arrow right here. This arrow needs to go parallel to the edge of your fabric. That's very important. If you have it crooked, when you wash your garment or when you try to sew it, it will show crookedly. Or if it's a solid color, it looks great and you sew it and you wash it and all of a sudden your legs are turning left when they should be going straight. So that's because the fabric didn't get cut on the straight of grain. So I know that that edge is straight over there completely. And I have my arrow. So all I have to do is measure the distance between the arrow. And it was at about 5.5. So I make sure it's 5.5 inches here. And I go up to the top of the arrow and it's 5.5 inches distance there. That's how I manage to get it parallel. And that's not a problem now that I have it laid out perfectly. So the next thing is I want to cut out is this is the sleeve. It's actually the armhole, called armscye, A-R-M-C-S-Y-E. I want to cut that out carefully. And even though it's flipped over, I can still see through it. And what we have on a pattern is called notches. It's a little notch right on the pattern. I'll show you a close up. You'll see notches, double notches or single notches. That's what you get. So that is very important. And this is while you're cutting. You need to notch that out on your fabric so that when you're done cutting, your fabric has this little notch sticking out of it. So I've already cut the bottom. This is the neckline. And I just relax my scissors. I put them flat on the table. And I don't pick the fabric up in the air. I leave the fabric flat on the table, and with my scissors, I cut very flat. I'm coming into it now with the scissors, and I'm showing you about the notch. It's really important. So I got to the notch. I'm just going to turn my scissors and make that little arrowhead or that little triangle on the fabric, and then just keep cutting. So what I've done is, as you can see, I've created that little notch sticking out. If you totally forgot and you cut it away, go ahead and put a pin there, and then you can mark those notches with a couple of pins. What the notches are for is later, this notch here will match up to the notch on the front. This is the back, the other notch on the front. Those line up to each other. So that's why we need to cut them out, and they're markers for us to match up the right point. The other thing that I know from doing a zillion patterns in my life, the back of every garment, the armhole has a double notch. So here's my double notch. I cut it away and I just cut straight across. I don't have to go up and down and make literally 2 notches. All I'm doing is cutting a super wide notch So it's just double wide instead of the single one. So when I peel that away, you can see my double notch sticking up there. It's right there. So the double notch to me is a way of knowing that it's always the back of the garment. You will always see a double notch in the back of your garment, and you will always see a single notch in the front of your armhole. And it's always at the lower part of your armhole. And what happens here is your sleeve pattern, which is this one here. This has the double notch. This is the shoulder part of your sleeve. And that is a single notch. So you'll put a little stitching along here with the sewing machine. You're going to put 2 rows of long stitches, and then you're going to pull on just one side of the stitches and bunch it up a little bit. I will demo that in person on the sewing machine later. But it's important to cut the notches out, and when you close your sleeve up on the underarm, those notches will match the front and the back of your garment. So you know that you've got to, even though this looks even, this here, the back of the sleeve here is shaped a little bit differently than the front of the sleeve. It's not an exact thing. Like if you fold this in half, it's not going to be exact. The back has just a little bit more in it. So it does matter on notching. So that's what I wanted to point out to you. I think I forgot to record it. Is to make sure that you cut your notches. And then to make sure when you're cutting, you just leave your fabric relaxed and flat down, and then just cut up on your notches. You'll also see other marks on the pattern, which are important. You'll see dots. And I know that dot, they're going to tell me to do something with it later. I usually sort of not always mark the dots. If I know what the dot's going to be, then I mark it. Like there's a small dot right here on the upper part of the front of the jacket and on the back. Those are just little small dots. So I think what they're going to tell me to do later is just match those dots up. And I can go look at the directions right now, but sometimes I just take a little snip. So what I'm doing is I'm going right next to where that dot is, and I'm just taking a very small snip with my scissors because I know I have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So if I just take a small snip, I can go in and find that snip later, but I'm also not intruding on my seam allowance. The snip is just another way of marking like a notch or something like that. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I wanted to just run that by you really quick because laying the pattern out is one thing, but then actually cutting it is another thing, because you got to understand what you're doing when you're cutting. So here's this piece that I had left over from between the 2 sleeves, and that's what we were talking about, Arthur. So if this was on the fold, you would simply open it up. But see, now that you have this decent sized scrap left, it's like, oh wow, you can get a pocket out of that. So that's why I cut the big pieces first, and then the semi-big pieces, I put those aside and keep them. I even, after I'm done making my garment, I'll keep those scrap pieces. Yeah, I'll keep them in, just throw them in a drawer until I either want to use them again or get tired of looking at them and throw them away, or pack them up and donate them to a kid's art class, just something. I like to at least do something with them later. You could also add it to maybe something else as an accent. So that's a little detail. Oh, it is recording, good. That's a little, yeah.
So what are you cutting out right there? What are those 2 shapes? Those are your sleeves?
This is the armhole here. Okay. This is the front, and this is the back.
Of the sleeve?
I have them laid out next to each other, and these are my notches right here on the sides. So I wanted to put those notches next to each other. That's why I laid them out like this, so that when I sew these together, my stripes will match up.
Okay, and are you cutting like 2 of each right now? Is that what that is?
Yes, that's why we fold our fabric the long way and lay it all out at the same time, so that when we're done cutting, we've cut either a right left or a single unfolded one piece.
Okay, and I guess like I'm just wondering, do you leave that the actual pattern piece of paper on there throughout, like during while you're sewing too, or do you take that off eventually?
Before when I was not confident, I used to leave it on, but it tends to drive me nuts. But now I take them apart because having explained the fact that I know that the back of my jacket has no seam in it, so I know that that's a big open piece, so I know that's the back. Also, the fact that there's a double notch on the armhole, then I know that's also the back. So there's little indicators to tell me, what pattern piece that is. But until you get familiar, yeah, you can leave them on, like you could just lay them on the table and it'll say piece, grab piece number 1 and sew it to piece number 2. Sometimes I do have a pattern that's really complicated. So rather than leaving the pattern pieces on, I just mark on a little sticky note and I pin it onto each pattern piece, number 1, number 2, number 3, so that when I'm looking for that piece that they're telling me to put number 1 on number 2, then I can go and find them. But because it has a lot of complicated pieces in it. But usually it's okay to just leave the pattern piece on until you're ready. But for sure you use these patterns again. They're thin and they're tissue, but they are certainly reusable. I cut next to the black line so that I can see my line next time I need it. And I just, kind of fold it back and put it in the envelope as best I can. It usually folds up okay. And then you just smash it down and shove it in there. That way you always have it. Yeah, they're definitely reusable. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, that's the front and the back. So I just have to cut out my sleeve and the hood of my hoodie. That's the hood piece. It doesn't look like a hood piece, does it?
It kind of does.
Oh, it does? Good. Yay.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, the sideways view of it. So I
Yeah.
have to decide if I want it single or double. I could make it double if I wanted.
Yeah, I cut my notches off by accident, so I'm gonna need a pin.
Oh, that's okay. My mom used to cut them off, and then I learned from somebody else. His mom, it may not always be right. Maybe that was the only time she was wrong. But she used to just fold hers and snip it, and so notch inward. And
Yeah,
a
that's what I
lot
was
of people,
thinking. I thought
yeah,
that.
a lot of people notch inward. But if something fits you a little bit too small and you need to let it out and you've notched inward, you've got a hole.
That's true.
So that's why I force myself to notch outward. And if you want to use a pin to mark it, or again, you could just do a snip for a notch. It's up to you. Just don't snip really deep. Just snip like a 1/4 inch in. It's totally fine.
Okay.
It's like whatever works,
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna just cut this out really quick. And then before we leave, I want to show Andrew how to knock off that t-shirt. So in a few more minutes, I'll be right. I just want, since I spent all this time trying to line these zigzags, these stripes up, I don't want to move this fabric yet.
Yeah, Jeannie, I have another question actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So I know you showed us how to do the cording last week,
Yeah.
right? So I was thinking for these pants, I wanted to sort of add like cording to like the pockets, like the side pockets and stuff. Like I have like some pockets like low towards the knee.
Mhm.
And I thought it'd be interesting to like sort of add like a cording to the seam, like to the edge of like the pockets or along some seams, maybe like the hem seam.
Yeah,
Just
like
a detail. I was
outlined or
wondering how I
something.
would go about that.
So you wanted to put it around the pocket like it was outlined, right?
Yeah, I wanted to like maybe like get a alternate fabric color, maybe like dye a piece of fabric, and then yeah, sort of like an accent around like an
Yeah,
outline.
that's fun. So all you would do is you would sew your piping all the way around the stitching line of your pocket using a zipper foot or whatever works. Oh, my phone just went dead. Oh, somebody's calling me, never mind. And then fold it in and then just sew your pocket down. You could also sew all the way around your pocket with your piping, then flip it over and sew a second piece of pocket facing it, like right sides together, and then turn it. In other words, make a complete double pocket, and then the piping would end up in between the two pieces of fabric.
Okay.
The only tricky part, and it would be tricky even for me, is I think what you would do is you flatten out your pocket really well, and then you sew it on from the inside, so with a zipper foot, so that the zipper foot is going along the edge of the piping, and you're going to try to hide that stitch in the crack between the piping and the fabric of the pocket. So you'll sew the pocket from inside of the pocket. Like you're gonna outline from the inside of the pocket to sew it on.
Okay.
Is that working for you? That
Kind of doesn't make sense, but maybe I'll run it past you again when I get there. I think
yeah,
it's
that's fine.
kind of
But just remember the foot of the machine is not gonna like your pocket piping. So you have to use a zipper foot and just do along one edge going
okay.
along the piping to sew it down.
Okay. Cool.
But I can, let me see, let me get a piece. So is the video back? Yeah, it's back. So somebody called in and it's threw my phone out of whack. So, but you can see the video, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll try to just mimic it with my hands. So I have 2 pieces of fabric. It's probably the easiest way to do this pocket. Just make the inside a lighter color. So, and then you just sew your piping and make sure the raw edge of your piping is facing to the inside of your pocket, like that. I'm sorry, like that.
Wait,
So
I
you
can't.
sew that on.
Okay.
Trying to get this thing to turn the long way. Darn.
So there
Okay,
you go.
better, much better. Oh no. Now I've lost it again. All right, I'm gonna do it, have to do it face on because my phone just did something weird. Okay, so you've sewed all the edges this way. Then you're gonna take a second piece of fabric and you're gonna lay it over the top. You're gonna leave a couple inches open somewhere in your pocket. So you're making a square out of this. You just lay the other piece over the piping, go from the piping side that you already stitched so you can see your stitching line. Then when you turn it, you're gonna have that.
Okay.
So there's your pocket. And this is what I was explaining about sewing it on. This piping is really stiff. Okay, so say you turned your pocket, you hit it with the iron, and that's what it looks like. You've got the piping outlining your pocket. So to sew this on, you need to sew it from the inside here with your zipper foot, where my fingernail is. Just sew really close to the edge of the piping. The closer you get to the piping, the more invisible your stitch will be. So you're going to sew all the way around your pocket except the top, just to attach that on. And the only thing that'll be loose is, I mean, it won't be loose, it'll just be the edge would be is your piping.
Cool. Okay, that seems
With
pretty
that's really close zipper foot. It'll be fun trying. Play with it first and then go for it.
Okay.
Okay,
Sounds good. Thank you.
you're welcome.